stronger and complete your task. Death to Kronos.
Death to Kronos.
Good morning, good evening, or good night, folks. I'm your host, Simon Redhand, and this is Gaming Red-Handed State of the Early Access, where I play and review games that have just entered or have been in early access and let you guys know if the game is worth jumping into now, waiting for a few patches, or putting on the watch list and forgetting until the full release. Today, we will be discussing the state of Hades 2. Hades 2 hit early access on May 6th, and it follows Melinoe, the sister of Zagreus, who was the protagonist of the first game. This time around, you find yourself not only breaking into Hades, but after some time trying to ascend up to Mount Olympus. To date, there's only been one major patch, which is focused on some quality of life issues. Some folks have taken issue the way that they've made a drastic change from dash spamming to now having a full-on dash, and then you hold it to make sure your character sprint. And the devs have committed to this position, is making it clear that they won't be changing from this anytime soon, as they want to make Melinoe feel distinct from Zagreus, but they are trying to their best to make it feel better. The patch also has addressed some of the tediousness of the gathering system, as you were forced to bring the right tool with you at all times for the materials you wanted to get, and accept that if you didn't have the right tool with you, you would just have to leave stuff behind. Now the system is more of a waiting system. So you choose the tool, and all that does now is just increase your chance to see the resource that corresponds to that tool, which is much better. The devs also put down a roadmap and a post letting the community know that they have seen the feedback and they are listening, which is always a good sign. If you played the first Hades, you should be familiar with the gameplay loop. You start your descent, you get boons which empower your character, and you try to make it to the end one room at a time. It's simple, but it's so effective and addictive. I love the art style and the presentation of the story, even though none of it is explained with the usual intro cutscenes and the like. Every run gives you a bit more insight into Melinoe and her motivations. I really like the character designs. The CGI and the voices are great so far, and just like with the first Hades, I always look forward to meeting new characters and hearing what they're going to say next. They have a lot of dialogue that seems to respond to everything from your choice of weapons, to the boons you have active, to the pets you have running alongside you. I like to keep my runs organic. I don't look up guides or other players playing the game, so my first few runs were a bit rough, but doable. I was able to easily clear the first boss on my first attempt, as I felt the mechanics were fair and telegraphed quite well. My issue came with the second floor, where it actually took me quite some time to overcome the Siren boss. As more runs were completed and upgrades slowly unlocked, I had to come to the determination that unlike Hades 1, it was far easier to completely brick your run. The balance on boons from certain gods need a bit of work. There are certain gods I actually just hate seeing because I just don't see the value in what they're going to offer me. Some of them are too specific and simply don't favor some weapons over others. Some that stand out to me are Hestia and her Scorch mechanic, which I find to be extremely weak because Scorch doesn't stack, and Apollo and his increased AoE because it outright is useless on certain weapon types. There are 5 new weapons this time around: the Witch's Staff, the Sister Blades, the Umbral Flames, the Moonstone Axe, and the Argent Skull. Each weapon promotes an interesting playstyle, and while some people talk about builds, I myself just picked whatever weapon was glowing with the bonus aura after I unlocked that mechanic. The starting weapon is the Witch's Staff. It has a decent attack speed and a decent range. The entire attack pattern kind of promotes linear attacks, encourage you to keep the enemy lined up and directly in front of you, and it feels well tuned. I spent the most amount of my time using this weapon. Next is the Sister Blades, which is a dual dagger setup that focuses on single targets with precision range attack. Its charge attack is unique that allows you to teleport behind the target. It's pretty cool. And then the range attack does a multi-blade. I found the Sister Blades to be the easiest weapon to brick outright on a run. If you don't get enough boons to at least form an idea of what kind of build you're going to use by the time you hit the first boss, just trash the run. These things are boon and dayless hammer specific and require good artifact selection at the start of the run to make sure that you can keep the momentum up. They are far too difficult to use early on, and I personally would avoid them until I've unlocked a fair amount of upgrades and high-level relics before trying to do any serious runs with them. I mean, I will use them if they are the focus of the buff. Like, every now and then it'll highlight which weapon to use. I'll do it when it shows up, but I don't consciously pick this weapon as the weapon to use to try to do anything serious with because I find it too difficult. The Umbral Flame is next, which is a variation of the weapons that Hecate uses. They're true cast weapons. If you don't get a method of mana regeneration early on, these weapons will fail outright. It has two different playstyles, which you have to decide on which one you're going to focus on. The primary attack, which is a projectile that after you channel it for a bit, gets larger. And the secondary attack sends out spinning circles that rotate around you. They don't seem to have a limit as long as you have mana. These weapons were fairly hard to get used to, but ironically, this is the first weapon I was able to beat Ares with. The Moonstone axe is next, which is a slow and deliberate weapon that I thought I would dislike using just to how slow it actually is, but it is one of my favorites, and once you get used to using it and get used to the quirks, it is one of the best weapons in the game and one of the easier ones to master using. It attacks with large arcing cleaves, and its secondary attack is a guard skill that does a good job of blocking everything from the front, followed by this large AoE after you charge it up. Finally, we have the Argent Skull, and quite frankly, I hate this weapon. I think this weapon is probably the worst weapon in the game. For me, it probably gets better later on, but honestly, its entire playstyle is repulsive to me. It has an ammo-based system where you throw these skulls out with the primary attack, and then use your secondary attack to kind of close the gap to retrieve them. I haven't figured out how to make this weapon worthwhile. Even though it does a good amount of damage when you do shoot it, I just find the attack rhythm it demands so off-putting that I often avoid using this weapon, even if it has the bonus award attached to it. I sincerely dislike this weapon. When you're playing, you'll see there are some stages that have like floating pools of water and the like, and your skulls will go and they'll just sit on top of the water and you can't retrieve it. You basically have to wait for the timeout and return to you. So when you're in a fight and you have your skull floating in the middle of the pool and you can't get to it because it's off the map, now you're sitting around running around with maybe 2 of 3 or one of 3 ammo, and it really feels off-putting. And if you don't get a good boon for your special here, you really find yourself in situations where you can't attack or defend. When you play with it, you'll see maybe I just don't know how to make it work. Either you're going to like this weapon or you're going to just really dislike it. Before heading into dungeons, you're encouraged to select your Astral Cards, which is from as soon as you come into the training area. It's the first gate. This starts off with about, I think only has like 9 cards at the beginning, and as you unlock more cards, it starts expanding further and further out. I have not defeated Kronos yet, though I don't have the last card unlocked. But one thing I would like to point out, to highlight Malenoe's portrait here. I'm almost embarrassed to admit this, but I played for about 40 hours before I realized you could spend souls to upgrade the amount of cards you could equip. The problem was I was using the gamepad, and the gamepad doesn't actually track over to this side of the screen, something the devs got to kind of look into. And I knew there was a way to expand it because the Fates said to figure it out, and I just thought it was based on unlocking all the cards, and after you unlock all the cards you would then spend points to unlock that. But no, it's actually you had to mouse over her image and then spend the psyche to get it, and it took me a while to figure that out. But once you get that done, you go to the Cauldron, and then Cauldron also allows you to unlock insights. Now insights are basically upgrades for the cards, which require you these M dust. These M dust are a recipe from the Cauldron here. Now, I'm not sure when I unlock these recipes, but they just showed up, and so I understand that. So you get the shadows from the shadow extraction recipe, which requires a couple of materials here. Ash is an early level material that you can get. So is Psyche and a fabric. You can get it from random encounters, but you can also just buy it from the vendor. And then you get S-Dust, which is from Chaos's Trials, which you gain access to later on in the game. You have to do the incantation to unlock access to the trial, but you don't get the option to do this until you interact with Chaos a few times. I don't know what triggers Chaos telling you to make this, but I think it's like you have to take a bunch of Chaos's boons over and over again until Chaos eventually tells you to do the ritual to unlock access to her trials. I was also able to easily unlock all of the artifacts by making sure that I brought at least 1 nectar with me each time I went out to do a run. One of the first unlocks I got for the base was the access to the vendor, and I would come here after every run and make sure that I purchased at least 1 nectar, and as I unlocked more social interactions with the characters, I would make sure I get bath salts also. You can also buy other materials here, such as the ashes and the psyche and the fate fabrics, but It's very expensive to buy the Stardust and the Ambrosia because it's not easy to get 500 to 800 bones at the end of your runs. You can also use this to do a mass order of materials. I can't open it right now because I have something already coming. But this allows you to spend, so that timer, that 18, is based on how many rooms you complete in the dungeon. And once it's done, it'll give you a bulk order, which I was also using Chiron's tickets to purchase. I'm not able to tell you what the best artifact is for which build and stuff like that, but I can tell you what I was using to run through. The Silken Sash carried me the hardest. It got me to the 3rd floor. You unlock this by giving a nectar to Arachne when you meet her on the 1st floor, and it gives you armor and an armor boost each time you change zones. And with this, I was able to get something crazy. Like I have a run where I got up to like 100 plus armor. It gets pretty crazy. And once you have this up here, you don't have to worry about your life ever getting triggered. I really like this artifact here. I also like the aromatic file, which you get from Narcissus on floor 2, but this one didn't really shine for me until I unlocked the ability to switch artifacts in between runs. I also use Transcendent Embryo because I like Chaos's boons, and starting off a dungeon with them randomly swapping actually felt really good. I didn't mind him. And Knucklebone's pretty good if you're trying to learn a boss for the first time. The damage reduction does add up. If you're taking a lot of hits and a lot of chip damage, this item is very helpful for learning a new boss. Eventually, you will stop using it though. And I also like the engraved pin for helping you stay alive. If you die, it's like another version of the name is escaping me right now. The Death Defiance. Sorry, I couldn't remember for a second there. There's a bunch of other stuff here. For the gods, it basically just ensures that their style shows up more often. I don't want to use these just yet. Eventually I will max out all of these artifacts, but for now I like the generic ones. I like the armor. I like this one here for in the beginning of the run. You start off trying to get a heroic boon as soon as possible, and I usually would switch to Silken Sash in the later floors, usually by the 3rd floor or the 4th floor. Or if I get what's his name, Hephaestus, and I get some kind of armor from him, then I will always put this on just so I can always have some method of regenerating armor, because it requires you to have armor to give you back armor. So this thing never turns off, and if you have any source of armor, it's really, really powerful. So this one here I really like. It's usually my go-to artifact. Well, the game feels extremely polished for an early access game. Make no mistake about it, it is in early access. All the artifacts have placeholder images along with some of the NPCs you encounter in the game. Now, it's not really a bad thing. They have all their voice lines in place, and then some of them have their images like when you meet them in the world. Like Echo has her in-game icon but doesn't have her portrait. Not her portrait inside the book, whereas Narcissus has nothing visible about him anywhere. I used to think this was just a look they chose, and I realized that these are just the placeholder images they put up here. Also, when you head up towards Mount Olympus, the game ends right after you kill the second boss, Ares. I don't particularly like the Chaos Trials. I was hoping for more creative interactions during the run, but most of these just involve you killing the floor boss with whatever weapon setup they give you. I can't imagine anyone finding this challenging unless they are the type to specialize in only one weapon. I think that these trials might be a cool opportunity to introduce unique bosses or even unique events that only exist in the trial, but in their current state, they are kind of a boring mechanic to do. The incantation mechanic is cool. I didn't find it too cumbersome to progress through, though I do wish there was some sort of hint given for where the materials could be found floor-wise. I focused on getting the vendor and the garden as quickly as possible, as well as all the tools. These made it really easy to keep progressing the game, along with everything else. Once you get the gardens unlocked, it allows you to plant seeds that you find with the shovel tool, and that allows you to quickly unlock more and more upgrades and materials as you go through the game. The faded list is also not bad, but it just seems like a throwaway list of prizes for doing what you're going to do anyway. I think it would be cool to have more creative requests on here with actual unique rewards. The same goes for the artifacts, which have the 3-star quality, but I think a 4-star with a difficult conditional would also be cool to add to the game. As it stands now, the artifacts just level up by equipping them and completing rooms, which is not too interesting. The same goes for the artifacts, which have a 3-star quality. I think a 4th star with a difficult conditional that's related to the artifact itself would be really cool to add to the game. As it stands now, these artifacts level up by just equipping them and completing rooms, which is not too interesting. I don't have too many complaints about the game. The loop is so engaging along with the storytelling and music that even when I fail a run, I can't wait to just get back out there and try again. I think if I had to have some complaints, I would say I don't like the weapon aspect system. You unlock the ability to acquire weapon aspects through the incantation system, and then you're just flooded with a bunch of them. I think there needs to be a better method of unlocking and acquiring these weapon variations, like a challenge system that involves you using the weapon is what I would lean towards. I find the bosses are somewhat of a bullet sponge, which could just be because some boons simply don't provide enough damage when upgraded. I don't have footage of this, but when I defeated Ares, my biggest complaint was how many immunity phases Ares has. Like, she flies off screen and you can't hit her. She goes outright immune when she's doing certain attacks and you can't hit her. She gets a bubble around her, you can't hit her. And on top of that, she has so much health that I think that fight took me like 5-6 minutes to finish. And the idea of doing that over and over again, it seems kind of crazy. I don't know if it was just my damage wasn't high enough or what the deal was, but I've been skimming around the Reddit and the Steam forums, and I don't really consider those to be like prime sources of player feedback, but it does seem to be a complaint that they don't like how much health some of these bosses seem to have. Also, you're fighting these bosses so often that I'm surprised they don't have more variations on what they do in their fights. I kind of think that this time around, each boss should have about 4 or 5 completely different variations in terms of the arena you encounter them in and the attack patterns they have, especially the Siren. You fight her so often that you get tired of hearing her song. I would love to hear more than one song from her, but I think that this game could really benefit from having not only different banter when you meet the bosses, which is already there, which is kind of cool, but different arenas and stages and locations you meet them in. Because this is an early access review, my scoring will be a bit different. There will be 2 determinations. First, is the game worth the value currently despite being an early access game, or should those interested in it wait for a patch, or further still, wait for launch and see the state the game is in at that time? And second, whether or not I'll be playing the game at launch. I can easily recommend Hades 2 for a buy, even 4 weeks in early access. There are 6 functioning bosses right now. 5 out of the 6 weapons are available to use. There is a lot of story and content, and most importantly, the combat loop is rock solid. I have about 60 hours into the game right now. I would have more if I wasn't so busy with work. I definitely will be buying the game at launch as I want to see how the story plays out, and I love the gameplay loop. Also, for those interested, it runs fantastic on the Steam Deck OLED. However, it does cause the console to run really hot. Well, that's it. Thank you guys for dropping by. I'm new to the content creation space, and as I continue to produce, I will improve. Like the video if you like it, leave a comment down below and tell me if you'll be picking up Hades 2. And if you have games in early access that you've been on the fence about and you want me to tell you what state it's in, leave the comment down below. Don't forget to subscribe. Have yourselves a good morning. And if this is the only video you watch of mine today, a good afternoon or good night.